The final antagonist of Bleach has arrived. The Quincy King has been a long time coming, but now he's back to burn Soul Society to the ground. But who is this guy? How'd he survive the destruction of the Quincy? What's his goal in the 1,000-year blood war? In this video, we'll be explaining Yhwach's backstory and power set. Let's get to it. Background: Birth of a God. Long ago, a strange child was born. His life was wretched for many years. This newborn could not see, could not hear, could not move, could not speak, he couldn't even cry. All he knew was nothingness. You'd think this baby had no chance of survival. He was cursed since birth to this strange life. Killing him would almost be a mercy. Yet the child knew that he would not die. Indeed, the people of its home village considered him a treasure. One touch from this bizarre baby would heal any ailment. Ailing lungs would be repaired. The lonely would find companionship. The cowardly would be granted courage. Even severed limbs could be regrown. This child held the power to impart pieces of his soul to others. Each time someone touched the boy, they would receive a fragment of his being, one that would fill whatever they were missing. He could treat any ailment, physical or spiritual. But while the people healed, the fragment of soul absorbed whatever it could of the individual. It retained their skills, talents, and knowledge. When they died, all that new information returned to the child to strengthen him. And these people all died quickly. Some took a few years, some a couple months. For a few, it was only a matter of days. Yet still, people came to receive the child's miraculous blessing. No one ever realized the curse that came with it. And as the cycle continued, the child's broken body slowly began to heal. Every new piece of soul slowly strengthened the youth. Soon, for the first time, the boy could hear the people talk of him. He knew the name they'd given him, Yhwach, the name of their god. It seemed appropriate to the boy. He was happy to take that title as his own. This strange creature would go on to be the father of the Quincy. The hollow-killing spirit monks can all trace their ancestry and powers back to Yhwach. In time, the would-be god brought his descendants together by force, unifying the Quincy and consolidating his power into a mighty empire, the Lichtenreich. But even then, he had a higher goal, a brazen plan that defied all reason: attacking Soul Society. Yhwach led his armies of Quincy against the Shinigami realm, personally squaring off with Captain General Shigekuni Yamamoto. That fight did not end in the king's favor. The original Gotei 13 were ruthless killers, and the invading army tasted bitter defeat. Yhwach did not die, but he was sealed away, his threat removed. Without him, most of the Quincy were wiped out. Yhwach's most loyal followers retreated into the shadows of the Serete, building the Vandenreich and preparing to one day restart the war against Soul Society. Those that remained on Earth were purged by the Shinigami. Even those not loyal to Yhwach, who had taken no part in this war, stood by their insistence on purging hollows. The Death Gods had no other choice. Yhwach could not help his children. He was back to where he began, but that proved his salvation. He simply needed time to regain his powers once more. All Quincy, as his descendants, bear pieces of his soul. His return was just a matter of time. The Quincy prophesied as much, passing down a legend of the 999 years it would take their lord to return to full strength. Those few words, however, do not reveal the full extent of what this would require. 9 years ago, in accordance with this prophecy, the tyrant Yhwach took his power back from those he deemed impure, and he did so by force. His targets were mixed-blood Quincy living on Earth, those not directly in service to the Vandenreich. Most did not survive the experience. Those who did so died shortly thereafter. Yhwach, however, was not concerned about the deaths of his family. These distant kin were simply a regrettable sacrifice. He had not lost sight of his goal. It was far more important that he personally return to lead the Vandenreich. He's proven his acumen since returning to power, already taking control of Hueco Mundo. And now, the next step in his plan has arrived. Yhwach will throw whatever he has at the Gotei 13 in order to reach his final target, the Soul King himself, his long-absent father. The world of the living, the Soul Society, and Hueco Mundo. Yhwach is a threat to all three. But before we get into more detail on how, make sure you're subscribed, have hit the like button, and have rung the notifications bell. Now, back to the war. Personality, the Eternal King. Yhwach is the one man in Bleach who can make Sosuke Aizen look humble. Jokes aside, comparing the two villains is a good way to explain Yhwach's perspective. These two are both heavily defined by their pride. However, how it manifests is quite different. Aizen's flaw has always been his ambition. The former captain sought to break down the barriers between Shinigami and Hollow, becoming something greater than either. He saw himself as someone who could claim dominion over the universe, one who could take the throne of God. Aizen aspired to achieve transcendence and godhood, being willing to sacrifice anyone else that gets in his way. Aizen is a man of ultimate ego. He might have associates if they prove useful to him, but his first intent is always to grow stronger. He never lost sight of chasing divinity. But all this is ultimately a sign of insecurity. Aizen believes that he needs more, that he deserves more. There's a fear underlying that idea. If you need more strength, you aren't content with what you got. If you aspire to God's throne, it's because you think it's empty. When Aizen confronts Urahara about it, he can't process the other Shinigami's attitude. How can someone simply accept things the way they are? Yhwach, however, doesn't have to aspire to more. He doesn't need to get stronger. He's been told he was a god ever since he was a child. His followers return to him after death, and every time it strengthens him. Yhwach knows he's a god, and he's absolutely at peace with it. There's a security to his self-belief that Aizen lacks. Yhwach has a sense of self-righteous certainty. Every aspect of the Vandenreich exists to reinforce his self-confidence. He has loyal soldiers who are devoted to his personal service, and it gives him strengths that Aizen lacked. Yhwach does trust his subordinates, even granting his right-hand man, Haschwald, control of his accumulated power. Can you imagine Aizen opening himself up to anyone like this? That doesn't make Yhwach a kind ruler, however. He's just more secure in his position. Yhwach sees his followers, even the most loyal and devoted of the Quincy, as pieces on a game board. He will sacrifice his most elite soldiers if it serves his ends. After all, he's above them. He's a greater being, so it doesn't matter if his disciples fall. They live for him, so they can die for him. They're comrades in a greater fight, all working together towards one purpose, that being the destruction of the Soul King. While Aizen sought to step into the role of ruling divinity, Yhwach's goal has always been to dethrone the Shinigami god and leave no one in his place. The Soul King's presence is key to maintaining the barriers between the worlds of the living and the dead. It's his presence that regulates the flow of souls from one world to the next. To the Shinigami, this duty is sacrosanct. The barrier must be preserved. The alternative is apocalyptic. Yhwach, however, sees his father's fate as humiliation. The Soul King has been sealed away and used as a tool by the Shinigami. He'll bring that to an end. And if this disrupts the cycle of life and death, so what? Let the border fall. Let life, death, and afterlife be combined into one. All this cycle brings is pain and fear. If it takes a god to build a better world, then Yhwach will see that done. And he's got the strength to make good on that promise. Powers, Quincy King. You don't get to become Bleach's final villain if you're a weakling. Yhwach's strength is multifaceted, however. This guy has so much power, we're going to need to break it down piece by piece. The root of Yhwach's power comes from his soul imbuement. This is the same ability he had since birth and works the same way. He gives a piece of his soul to others with a touch, lets them cultivate it, then retrieves this fragment when needed. Think of this as the badass shonen version of a lone replacement scheme. He's not the only Quincy with such abilities, but they're vanishingly rare. No one can compete with Yhwach in this area. As the father of all Quincy, all of them bear a portion of his soul. And after death, all of those fragments return to Yhwach. By living and dying, the Vandenreich makes himself stronger. What's more, the Quincy King has developed a more powerful version of the power sharing technique. By directly inscribing a letter onto the target's soul and sharing his blood with them, he can grant more potent, specific abilities. His most powerful agents all bear a specific letter and ability granted through this method. Even Yhwach himself holds the letter A, signifying him as Almighty. Though who imbued him remains mysterious. You might think that's his weak spot. If you kill these subordinate Quincy, the ones with letters, you rob Yhwach of more significant pieces of his soul. No dice. Even with the death of these empowered followers, their souls flow right back to the Quincy King, complete with their granted power. The pursuit of war only makes Yhwach personally stronger. Even if he had no ideological goal to work towards, he would still live a life of battle. The deaths of his loyal sons literally keep him alive. And all of this is before you reach the heights of Yhwach's soul manipulation powers. That comes with the dreaded Auswählen, or holy selection. This is what the Sealed King used 9 years ago to mass execute the remaining mixed blood Quincy, redistributing power to himself. All it takes is a beam of projected light, and all of the target's life force is stripped away. Even now, Yhwach can do the same thing to any Quincy he deems superfluous. There's no way for the Quincy to escape this effect. Even proximity to the light is enough for the Auswählen to drain them dry. This was likely the seed that started the development of the Quincy medallions, the devices they used to steal a Shinigami's Bankai. Yhwach, however, can go one better than even that. The Quincy King has a personal spell known as the Sanct Altar. When cast, it forms a gigantic Zeichen that absorbs whatever power comes into contact with it. Yhwach is the only Quincy able to steal a Bankai using only his own power. Not only that, he alone may be able to steal techniques other than Bankai. Keto, full bring, nothing's off limits in theory. The only thing that Yhwach absolutely shouldn't steal are the abilities of hollows. Hollow energy is anathemic to the Quincy. Any attempt to absorb it would be akin to drinking poison. Even a god has his limits. Powers, personal combat. The Auswählen makes Yhwach extremely hard to kill. The power he drains from the Quincy can be used to heal him. Pure soul energy allows the Quincy King to repair even strange ailments that regular healing wouldn't help with. With how many Quincy Yhwach has to draw from, any injury is going to be temporary. He simply needs time to repair it and more souls to draw upon. But more than healing, Yhwach's raw strength helps him barrel through most obstacles. The energy he's absorbed at this point has gone far beyond letting him move. The king's spiritual pressure is more than enough to bring normal people to their knees. The Quincy and Shinigami have always been counterparts, and among the Quincy, Yhwach sits at the pinnacle. As such, he knows Rishi manipulation techniques too difficult for many of his children to use. The first of these is Vina, which routes spiritual energy through his veins. This has some limitations. It can only enhance either attack or defense at a given instant. However, it's still extremely useful, and Yhwach has taken it further than most. His Vina Alphabin technique projects the defensive Blut beyond his own body. It's an almost impenetrable force field, consuming everything that touches the barrier in order to sustain itself. All of this comes before the regular Quincy method of combat: spiritual weaponry. While most Quincy manifest a bow of some kind, Yhwach's primary weapon is a sword. The X-shaped guard provides one more reference to the Quincy Zeichen. That shouldn't be seen as a limitation, however. He can still fire energy blasts like any other Quincy, even without a bow. His rate of fire and overall spread are quite impressive too. Keeping your distance won't save you from Yhwach. When he does have to go for a big, impressive shot, that's when the Sankt Bogen comes out. This gigantic weapon can launch a volley of massive arrows at impressive speed. This is less a bow and more a siege engine. The only flaw with it is that it's simply too large to be practical in 1-versus-1 combat. Should Yhwach be faced with an army, however, this will prove a useful attack. While he never used it in the manga, it's almost certain that Yhwach was able to adopt the Quincy Vollständig, a heightened angelic form used by many of his disciples. This enables the mass conversion of Rishi into fuel, amplifying all Quincy attacks to a great extent. It's essentially a perfected version of the Let's the Steel, granting the same boost without the following loss of powers. While Yhwach's personal command of Rishi was always extreme, should he ever shift into the Vollständig, things will get downright apocalyptic. Make sure to watch out for that. Powers Almighty. All that is enough for Yhwach most of the time, but this isn't the upper limit of the Quincy King's power. Like his subordinates, Yhwach bears a letter of empowerment. When he activates the abilities of A, the Almighty, he grows beyond ridiculous. He gains a whole host of new powers, all of which far outclass anything bestowed upon his subordinates. Let's start with what we already went over. With the Almighty active, Yhwach's soul manipulation is boosted to the point of full-on consumption. The Quincy King can absorb fallen enemies outright, adding their power directly to his own. In a protracted battle with multiple foes to claim, Yhwach could get very strong very quickly. That's not the heart of the Almighty, however. The simplest way to describe this ability is precognition. Yhwach, when the Almighty is active, can see all possible futures, not just the most probable. Every possibility is laid out for him. Thus, it is literally impossible to surprise Yhwach when the Almighty is activated. Whatever is about to happen, he already sees it coming. Be it a lunge with a sword or a sudden explosion, you can't possibly hit this guy. But wait, it gets infinitely worse. If Yhwach sees a power through his foresight, he will know it. And no power or ability he knows in this way can harm him. He doesn't even have to dodge your blows or avoid your attacks. Yhwach is quite literally indestructible with the Almighty active. How could you make an attack that God did not see coming? This is one defense no amount of power-ups can penetrate. It's absolute. And somehow, that just wasn't broken enough. No, a perfect immunity to everything and borderline omniscience aren't even Yhwach's heights of power. That's in his ability to manipulate the future. It's not as big a gap as you might think from being able to see the future to being able to rewrite it. Say you somehow circumvent the almighty defenses. Even if you land a blow strong enough to slay this monster, it's still not enough. 10 years from now, Yhwach will return. He'll be weaker, sealed, and lesser for it, but he won't be gone. Even the future is his to control. Yeah! Are you surprised Yamamoto couldn't take this guy? This is a ludicrous power set. How could it possibly get stronger? Powers, Soul King. The Almighty allows Yhwach to absorb a target. Our once-sealed king is trying to eliminate the Soul King. Should Yhwach be able to absorb his father's soul, it would actually make an already desperate situation entirely hopeless. The one thing holding Yhwach back is his innate curse. He does lose energy slowly over time. He can slow, he can tire. For all his power, the Quincy King is not a god, but the Soul King is. This would be enough to perfect Yhwach's abilities and grant him a ton of additional energy at the same time. As far as the Shinigami are concerned, this is the worst case scenario. If Yhwach was able to pull this off, he would be unrivaled in terms of strength. His spiritual pressure alone would be enough to reduce buildings to rubble. That raw ability would be potent in a fight, serving as a near impenetrable shield against his enemies. There'd be so much force, it'd be clearly visible. A veil of darkness empowering his every action. This godly evolution would also increase Yhwach's command of Rishi to total mastery. He could imprint lasting orders on the spiritual particles, affecting their base properties. Imagine if Yhwach could remove Rishi from Shinigami control across a wide area. He could build structures from spiritual matter, even encapsulate the entire Seirete within an impenetrable barrier, imprisoning all the death gods in a stroke. Almighty Soul King Yhwach would have absolute power and absolute control wrapped up into one downright devastating package. The scope of his abilities would also grow. Yhwach would have full mastery over the boundaries between worlds, the same barriers the Soul King once regulated. He could open portals with a wave of his hands, letting him escape any situation. He could force the worlds together, speeding up the breakdown that would follow the loss of the king. This is a man who could devastate entire worlds. Just imagine all that might be pitted against the defenders of the Soul Society. How will our heroes fare against Yhwach? Could anything stop this guy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I've been Anthony Fan. Have an awesome day.